Depression is a debilitating medical illness that, according to the National Institutes of Health, affects 8.4% of adults in the U.S. Since the beginning of the 20th century, treatments for depression changed with each new decade. At the turn of the century, depression was seen as a mental sickness, and patients were admitted to mental asylums. In the 1930s, depression was treated with electroshock therapy. In the 1940s, lobotomies were sometimes used for severe depression. It wasn't until the 1960s that cognitive therapy gained traction, leading psychologists to study brain chemistry and physiology as a cause of depression, and not just a behavioral anomaly. In the 1980s, a new class of drugs called SSRIs were released on the market. They were seen as a wonder pill that corrected the chemical imbalance in the brains of the depressed. Recently, this long-held theory of depression being caused by a chemical imbalance has lost support among psychologists, as it lacks significant evidence. What more, SSRIs are still being prescribed to treat a cause of depression that doesn't exist, and in some cases does more harm than good. In this video, I'll be discussing the dark science of SSRIs. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that regulates numerous processes in the body, such as sleep, memory, attention, body temperature, and most importantly, mood. SSRI stands for Selective Serotonin Reuptake Inhibitor. As the name implies, SSRIs inhibit the reuptake of serotonin. When your body releases serotonin, it binds to receptors and is then retaken up back into the neuron from which it came. SSRIs block the reuptake channels, thereby increasing the amount of time that serotonin binds to receptors. Because serotonin has a hand in maintaining mood, the idea is if someone is depressed, they just need more serotonin to make them feel happy. If increasing a neurotransmitter to make someone happy sounds overly simplistic, that's because it is. The origin of the chemical imbalance theory dates back to a time when psychiatry was trying to explain mental illness through a lens of biochemistry. Two separate discoveries in the 20th century would ultimately lead psychologists to adopting the chemical imbalance theory to explain and treat depression. The first discovery occurred in 1952 at Staten Island Seaview Hospital, a sanatorium for tuberculosis cases. Doctors began treating tuberculosis patients with an experimental drug called iproniazid, which increased monoamine neurotransmitters. Monoamine neurotransmitters like dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin are broken down by enzymes as part of a biological process. When taken, iproniazid inhibits these enzymes, thereby keeping neurotransmitters around longer and increasing their effects. Due to the nature of tuberculosis infections, patients had long stays at sanatoriums from several weeks to months, making them lethargic and depressed. However, doctors quickly noted that when patients were given iproniazid, their mood became very positive and active due to the increase in monoamine neurotransmitters. Doctors deduced that a patient's mood could be improved if certain neurotransmitters were altered in the body. However, iproniazid was discontinued in 1961 for being linked to hepatitis. The second discovery would come more than a decade later. A 1967 study published in the British Journal of Psychiatry reported that people with depression had lower serotonin levels than normal. This was found when serotonin samples were recovered from the brains of individuals who had committed. Researchers found them to have lower serotonin levels than non-depressed people. With these two discoveries, psychologists came to the conclusion that depression was a biochemical phenomenon, and pharmaceutical companies aptly responded to that claim. But first, a word from today's sponsor, Private Internet Access (VPN). A VPN, or Virtual Private Network, is a service that encrypts your internet connection and hides your IP address. With a VPN like PIA, not even your internet service provider can see your private info or the websites you visited. Also, PIA does not store your data. Their no-logs policy has been proven in court. You can also change what country you're in, giving access to more streaming content. You can choose from 84 countries plus all 50 states. PIA also offers P2P file sharing and is one of the few VPNs to do so. This video took about 30 hours to make, so when I finally posted it, it was time to relax. Unfortunately, one of my favorite TV shows, The Office, is only available on Netflix in the UK. With Private Internet Access VPN, I just changed my location to the UK and I'm watching The Office.
Yes.
It's compatible with Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android, Linux, and more. And there are no limits to how many devices you can use with a single subscription. PIA has over 30 million downloads and has been rated excellent on Trustpilot. Dark Science viewers can get 83% off plus 4 extra months free. That's just $2.03 a month. Signing up is risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee and 24/7 customer support. Sign up via the link in the description below. From a pharmaceutical perspective, if depression was purely an issue of low serotonin, the cure was to increase it. By the early 1970s, Eli Lilly made the first selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, Prozac. By 1988, it was being sold in pharmacies across the country, and the rest is history. Today, the low serotonin, or chemical imbalance theory, has come under scrutiny, and very few psychologists, if any, openly support it. In July 2022, a study from the Journal of Molecular Psychiatry performed a meta-analysis on 361 different studies on whether a correlation was made between depression and low serotonin. The study concluded there was no connection whatsoever between depression and serotonin. Experiments were even done where patients' serotonin levels were artificially lowered by removing tryptophan, a serotonin precursor, from their diet. Even with artificially reduced serotonin, patients did not show signs of depression or change in mood. What does this mean for people taking SSRIs? SSRIs increase serotonin, but as we've seen, increasing serotonin is not addressing the problem. However, SSRIs do have some benefits, explaining why they're still being used today. Psychologists and even some patients state that SSRIs work for them by numbing feelings of anxiety. For someone with severe OCD, panic disorder, social anxiety, or PTSD, this numbing effect can be a major relief. From a medical standpoint, even if SSRIs are not treating the cause of depression per se, it's better to have a mild indifference to depression than to take it on full bore. But there's also a downside. The effect of blunting depression is advised for those with severe depression or major depressive disorder. People with mild to moderate depression who take SSRIs numb the valleys of depression, but also the peaks of happiness, or just wipe out their emotions altogether. This sounds dramatic, but it's how some people have described their experience. Here are some confessionals from people on the subreddit r/antidepressants talking about the negative impact SSRIs have had on their lives. You don't feel bad anymore. You don't feel good, but you didn't before, so it's not that bad. You feel like a zombie. You act like a zombie. You feel dull and slow and sluggish. When someone screams in your face, you barely register, but it felt different than before. It works, and it doesn't work. Over time, they make me feel lethargic and emotionally numb. When I quit, I had severe withdrawal for 8 months and developed PSSD, so I may have dysfunction for life. Some have made my emotions feel smothered in plastic wrap, like I know they're under there, but they're totally suffocated and I can't access them. It's an unsettling feeling. When I'm super depressed, sometimes my feelings will be blunted, but I don't even care. SSRIs blunting emotions can be very beneficial for people with major depressive disorder, for struggles with day-to-day living. But for mild or moderate depressive cases, this emotional dampening can be less beneficial. This isn't just an opinion among adversely affected patients and skeptics. In 2008, Irving Kirsch, a psychology professor at Harvard University, published results of a controversial study on antidepressant effects submitted to the FDA. In comparing placebo effects to antidepressants, Kirsch found that SSRIs only benefit those with severe depression and not those with mild or moderate depression. The basis for this was that in mild to moderate cases, the placebo worked just as well or sometimes better than the SSRI. It was only in severe cases that SSRIs performed significantly better than the placebo. Kirsch concluded that the unwanted side effects caused more risk than reward for patients with mild or moderate depression. In 2019, the Royal College of Psychiatrists stated that the routine use of antidepressants for mild depressive symptoms is not generally recommended. This recommendation pertains to the harsh negative effects that may cause more detriment to someone who is mildly or moderately depressed. One well-known side effect of SSRIs is post-SSRI sexual dysfunction, or PSSD. Symptoms of PSSD are decreased libido, failure to reach climax, impotence, and even numbness of the genitals. One study from the Journal of Sex and Marital Therapy ran a double-blind test where 344 participants were given SSRIs. They found 58% of the 344 participants presented symptoms of PSSD. A separate study from the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry found the prevalence of PSSD to be between 25 and 73% of SSRI users. There's even a subreddit called r/PSSD, where users share their experience while taking or coming off of SSRIs. Another side effect that's been very controversial, and for good reason, is increased aggression from SSRIs. With an increase in mass shootings in the last 2 decades, some groups have tried to blame this pattern on SSRIs. This is because some studies have linked increased aggression and dissociation, which may influence a shooter. While the correlation to mass shootings and SSRIs has been disproven, there are some studies that have found a slight increase in aggression while on SSRIs. A 2006 study from the medical journal PLOS Medicine concluded that SSRIs cause a slight increase in aggression compared to placebo. In the study, 13,000 participants were divided into 2 groups. One group was given placebo and the other was given an SSRI called paroxetine. Following behavioral tests and general observation, the SSRI group showed a 2-fold increase in aggression compared to the placebo group. However, the prevalence for aggression in both groups was less than 1%, with 0.31% of placebo showing aggressive behavior versus 0.65% in the SSRI group. Though the prevalence was very rare, there was a marked increase in aggression in the SSRI group. Lastly, one of the most serious side effects that turned the FDA upside down is the increased risk of suicidal tendencies while on SSRIs. According to 2004 FDA clinical trials, suicidal behavior increased by 80% for users under 25 years of age within the first 2 months of starting SSRIs. However, it is firmly noted that after this initial exposure, users overcame this intense period and no longer had ideation after 2 months. Yet, in 2006, the FDA required the infamous black box warning label on 36 SSRI drugs, stating it may cause suicidal ideation. The black box label is the most severe warning the FDA can place on a drug, just short of banning it. It's clear that SSRIs are not ideal for people who don't have severe depression. Still, mild and moderate depression can be debilitating and may need medication. Recently, neuroscientists have looked into psilocybin, the active ingredient in psychedelic mushrooms, as an alternative. fMRI scans have shown brain connections being rebuilt after taking psilocybin. fMRI scans show metabolic activity in the brain by changes in blood flow. In this fMRI, parts of the brain that are yellow and orange signify more blood flow and therefore increased activity. By contrast, parts that are blue show decreased activity. When comparing a depressed brain and non-depressed brain, you can see the depressed brain has less activity than the non-depressed brain does. It's theorized depression may change networks in the brain that help us to process stress and emotions. Brain scans have shown reduced activity in the amygdala and prefrontal cortex of depressed people. The amygdala processes emotions and the prefrontal cortex interprets those emotions through logical understanding. Reduced activity in these regions hinder the ability to logically process emotions and adapt to stress. However, fMRI scans taken after consuming psilocybin show these regions to have increased activity. In a 2017 study from the journal Nature Medicine, patients with major depressive disorder who were resistant to SSRIs were split into 2 groups. One group was given daily doses of psilocybin, and the other an SSRI called escitalopram for 6 weeks. fMRI scans were performed at the start of the study and 3 weeks after its completion. fMRI scans showed higher interconnections between brain networks for the psilocybin group and no change in brain network organization in the escitalopram group. In questionnaire responses, the psilocybin group had a 50% improvement 5 weeks after the trial ended. In contrast, the escitalopram group had higher depression scores and less brain activity. The study concluded that psilocybin had global increases in brain network integration, which helped provide a better antidepressant response. Recently, this therapy has begun to gain more traction among the public and medical professionals. However, due to psilocybin being classified as a Schedule I drug, it's difficult to obtain for research and study its long-term effects. So what about the future of SSRIs? Psychologists and psychiatrists agree that though SSRIs are treating symptoms of an illness that does not exist in the eyes of science, they still provide relief. SSRIs are not the best treatment for mild and moderate depression, but doctors do agree that they're better than no treatment. Psychology researcher Mark Horowitz, who came out against the chemical imbalance theory and discussed issues with SSRIs with Insider Magazine, stated, "That numbing effect can be very relieving for people. If you are in complete strife and everything's a panic, then being a bit numbed probably comes as a great relief." However, Horowitz admits that researchers need to learn more about depression to properly treat it. Thank you for watching this episode of Dark Science.